met you actually when you were doing stand-up, because my ex is a stand-up, and I think it was like at Caroline's like 20 years ago.
Wow.
Could be, right?
Yeah,
I'm
very
thinking,
much so.
I'm
Could have
thinking,
been 28 years ago.
it could have been 25 years ago. Actually, I did stand-up then, yeah, but anyway, I think it was. But then she blew me away as the co-creator of The Daily Show. The Daily Okay. Many years later, last year to be exact, I rediscovered her on Twitter. And so now I get my own daily dose, and I suggest you do the same. She's fantastic on Twitter. And as a matter of fact, you know, not only is she changing news, but she affected me. We had an interaction that I don't even know if you're aware of that caused me to write a Huffington Post piece that ended up being like a huge thing for me. And it was from a conversation we started. So she does everything. Okay.
What was the conversation? You can't leave us hanging.
I didn't tell you, it's there though. Okay, she's the co-founder of Air America Radio. She continuously changes the way we get our news. As a performer, Liz has brought her political wit to The Daily Show, as a correspondent, and later to the radio waves as host of Unfiltered, Air America's radio mid-morning show with Chuck D and Rachel Maddow. You know that show, right? Hello. Known as one of the top political satirists in America, Winstead is currently touring the country. She gets a real book tour. This is what happens when you have a real book. A real book. Thank you very much. Bringing her razor-sharp insights to the stage, selling out shows from LA to New York City. When Liz is not on stage, she writes for The Guardian, The Huffington Post, and at her website, LizzWinstead.com, which we'll put up on the Women Who Write group. And she's a regular on MSNBC, giving her spin on breaking news. Her first book, Lizz Free or Die, just dropped. All right, 30 books was supposed to be sent here today, and there was a little faux pas, little mistake, but all those books are signed and at Vroman's. And so please, go to Vroman's, very close, 10 minutes away, and get a signed book. Or, you know, you can go anywhere and get it, but if you want a signed one, they're at Vroman's. And if you tell us before you leave today who wants a book, Liz will make sure that those books are waiting for you when you get there. So we're very excited. I'm very excited to have her here. Ladies, please welcome Liz Winstead!
Unbelievably great. Just a sidebar a little bit, I took a break from doing TV to start writing this book. And what I did was, I've been on a year-long tour to raise money for Planned Parenthood. To do stand-up. Nice. But one of the reasons I did that is because I believe in reproductive choice and health. But also because when you work in a male-dominated world, it was one way to gather a whole bunch of really interesting women together and go do shows. It was very selfish on a lot of levels. So to walk into this room and see all of you here, it's fucking awesome. So thank you for doing this and gathering and being women who support each other so obviously, heartfeltly, and it's just great. So I'm going to read a little bit of, I was born and raised in Minneapolis with crazy Catholic, youngest of 5 kids. My father is from Mississippi. My parents met in World War II. My dad is just about everything you would expect a man who is 86 and grew up in Mississippi to be. Super open-minded. Really racially tolerant. And thrilled to move to what he called the People's Republic of Minnesota. My mother convinced him, well, I think just said, if you ever want to have sex with me, you will no longer be a Baptist, you will convert to Catholicism. And she was kind of one of those scando-aggressive women. Do you know the Minnesota nice thing? They talk about it, but it's not really nice. It's all bullshit. It's like they'll say things, she's like, you know, I like your hair longer. It makes your neck look less muscular. But my favorite thing my mom ever said to me, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight kind of into the family I grew up in before I started reading is I went back 2 years ago to Minnesota, and Minnesota Public Radio does a lecture series every year. And they take a week out of the summer and they book really interesting people to come in and read at this amazing Presbyterian church. So the year I read, the week was Hillary Clinton, Desmond Tutu, Jonathan Alter, and me. So I'm in New York getting ready to go, and I get a call from my mom, and she goes, well, gosh, I just picked up the paper and saw the ad for this thing you're doing. You're the only one I've never heard of. Just to give you an idea of the self-esteem one has when one launches into great to meet you. My dad was a 3-pack a day smoker for many years, and as he got older, he developed emphysema and COPD and lung disease, and in the last probably 12 years of his life, he was in and out of the hospital with this, and so that's kind of just where I'm going to start the essay. I think Dad secretly loved going into the hospital as it gave him the freedom he never really had at home. Full control of the television remote. He didn't have to sit through As the World Turns or The Guiding Light. Mom's stories. And he could surf and bitch about how much he had to surf. And then he would interject ad hominem grumblings about the shit he saw in his 20 seconds of staying on each program. He was constantly editorializing, a non-stop ed. If Oprah Winfrey's so inspirational, why doesn't she inspire people to turn off her show and go out and do something?
Go, Dad.
She already good at this motivation racket, her ratings would be in the shitter. He had a point. I must confess, I also secretly liked it when Dad was in the hospital too. Because when it was, I timed my daily visits for 3 p.m. That was the time that Jeopardy was on in Minneapolis. I would climb into bed with him, he would rub my hand, and we'd watch Jeopardy. Watching Jeopardy together was a ritual I started in college when I tried to find a way to avoid talking politics with him. He was endlessly frustrated by my liberalism, and I thought his Reaganitis was, well, acute. Our common ground was Jeopardy. We sat and watched the show, and for 30 minutes we screamed at the TV, not at each other. By showing off our general knowledge prowess, we proved to each other that even though we disagreed on a fundamental life philosophy, somehow shouting, "What is the Sudetenland?" simultaneously, and being correct meant neither one could call the other stupid. It was a perfect détente. When he beat me at Jeopardy, I always thought to myself, he hates stupid people. How can he know so much stuff and still like Reagan? When I won, he tossed out one of his many theories about how I turned out the way I did. In my early 20s, he blamed it on the fact that I was brainwashed by the bearded women's livers who taught man-hating 101. As I got older, we started fighting about the issues like Iran-Contra or the first Gulf War. That's when he added a new wrinkle to his theory. Maybe it's because you were conceived the night Kennedy won the election. I like that one. I counted back 9 months and it was totally plausible. I had no idea. How cool. But then I foolishly asked, well, Dad, how do you know that? How can you be sure? To which he simply replied, I just know. Okay. But it was when my politics turned more political, but it was when my comedy turned more political that he had the aha moment that made most sense to both of us, because it was a combination of one of his twisted truths with our shared sense of humor. Spook. He called me Spook. He called all of us kids Spook. How I know? I had no idea it was a bad word until I heard Archie Bunker say it. screwed up. I raised you to have an opinion, and I forgot to tell you it was supposed to be mine. He said this quite a bit. It was the way he called Uncle, no matter who seemed to have the upper hand in an argument. It always made us laugh, and it helped me see that even though we fought bitterly, he loved the fact that he instilled the fight in me. He was proud I had an opinion, and he baited me to show it, because when I was at my most passionate, he could see himself most in me. The more political I got, the more I saw it too. But it wasn't until I overheard him on the phone one day that I had my own aha moment and realized how proud I am of being so much like him, and how I had an obligation to live up to who he was. I was in Minneapolis, and I was booked to perform at a fundraiser for a local pro-choice organization. It was 1999, and my folks had moved into a senior high-rise in Bloomington, Minnesota, a city just 15 minutes from downtown Minneapolis. It was one of those retirement communities that had an exercise room nobody used, and a library nobody used, and a sun porch nobody used, and a party room nobody ever used. It was the kind of place you move into when you've sold the house but still want to live independently. I call it Club Medicare. Club Meds, for short. I always stayed at Club Meds when I visited, and I always slept in my dad's bed, because he slept in the recliner in the den. As his emphysema worsened, it was easier for him to breathe sleeping at a slant. Plus, he could watch a Def Comedy Jam all night. He loved Def Comedy Jam. I mean, loved Def Comedy Jam. And when he watched Def Comedy Jam, he began something I call a cougher. It is one of those laughs that is so intense that it turns into a cough and you think someone is going to die. And then eventually they laugh their way out of it and get on a nebulizer for 15 minutes and they're good. One day I made the mistake of asking him what it was about Def Comedy Jam he loved so much. There's nothing funnier than a black guy begging for pussy. I will be honest and tell you that what bugged me the most about that comment wasn't the weird racism behind it, but the fact that I was a comedian, and I will never be a black guy begging for pussy. So in his eyes, my comedy would always be inferior to anything on Def. When I stayed with my folks, I usually woke up in the 7 a.m. alarm that was my mom laying in bed saying the rosary while simultaneously doing her leg exercises. Oh, I'm sorry, did I wake you? You fucking woke everyone. But on this morning, it was different. This morning, I woke up to the deafening power of a pair of eyes staring at me. As I slowly opened one eye, Mom was standing over me, holding the local paper to an ad for the pro-choice event I was performing at. She had something to say, and I think had to say it for about 2 hours. Why do you have to advertise your deal? So we can raise money. To pay for abortions? No, to pay for ways to torture you. Whatever's left over goes for abortion. You don't get it, do you? You don't get me, do you? It was one of our typical aggressive exchanges on the subject. I got pregnant in high school the first time I ever had sex. I have an essay in the book about that comes earlier. So, on the subject of abortion, Mom, not very excited. She did what she always does. She went into the TV room, and I needed to get out of the house. Because every time I spoke publicly on abortion, I knew my parents died a little inside. They didn't hide it. They knew I went through the incident, as my mother always called it. And if they had their way, it would have been an experience that was a private family matter, never to be spoken of again. Something that you should really be an endless source of your self-evaluation that solidified your devotion to Catholicism. I went in a different direction. I tossed down some clothes and I harumphed into the TV room, and my parents were doing something on the web TV, probably forwarding shitty joke emails to me. That to look forward to when I got back. I'm going to Starbucks so I can just get a New York Times, and I'll be back. And well, this jarred my dad into a brief tirade. The New York Times for what? The New York Times is an Israeli-occupied territory. They should just print the Jerusalem public school lunch menus in all. They already do, Dad! I got to Starbucks too late. They were out of the New York Times. I could just hear my dad's voice. You'll never wake up earlier than a Jew! I don't even know what that means. I did not want to go back to their apartment. That thick humidity of anger and disappointment was just languishing there. But I had to. When I stormed out, I left my fucking purse in the kitchen. So I was stuck. I drove home slowly and I sulked back down the hallway to their apartment. I opened the door to hear Dad on the phone. He was so angry. That anger where you can actually hear the red in his face. Who is this? Oh, you're gonna call here and not tell me your name? Well, let me tell you something. To call here and accuse my daughter of being a baby killer and not tell me who you are is cowardly horseshit. At least my daughter says what she thinks and doesn't hide who she is. She says her name. I'm proud I raised a daughter with some balls. Go to hell. I heard him then angrily struggling, trying to get the phone on the receiver, and I kind of just took a breath, and I moved forward, and I walked into the TV room, and before I could say anything, Mom made the first move in that ongoing game of, let's pretend this never happened. You forgot your purse and I made you some coffee. I know it's not Starbucks. She told me she had immaculate degeneration. Like it's endless. Sidebar. Blindness from the Virgin Mary. So I walked in and I kissed her on the forehead, and then I asked with great hesitation to my father, who was that? I don't know. Just some broad who called because she saw that ad for your deal in the paper. She just started yelling shit and wouldn't tell me who she was, so I just hung up. He just looked at me and then took a hit on his asthma pipe, and he reclined all the way back in the chair, and he just looked and said, I screwed up, Spook. I raised you to have an opinion.